All witnesses saw was a van go over the side about 8 this morning. Far below the bridge deck, 9 Pacific Islanders, many who don't speak English, were in a desperate struggle for survival. The van was submerged in a creek. Victims of the accident were hurting, some unconscious in the water. Suddenly, luck came in the form of one man. Off-duty Seattle firefighter Dan Bachmeyer happened by the scene and went into action.
There were still 4 or 5 people in the van at that time. I looked over, I heard somebody screaming for help, looked over and saw one other person that was face down in the water. Kind of, not, I wouldn't say being carried downstream, but downstream of the vehicle. There was also a female with him that was yelling, "Save my dad, save my dad."
Bachmeyer did just that. He performed CPR on the girl's dad, restarting his heart. Then he went to get the others, some who couldn't move, others moaning in pain. All 9 of them needed help.
I kind of find myself down there all by myself. The only people I saw around were victims of the accident, and there wasn't anybody coming, and I really had my hands full at that point.
Walk right up the ladder with him, John.
When aid units arrived, Bachmeyer had already turned himself into a one-man MASH unit, prioritizing his patients, making sure no one was still in the water. Suddenly, the man who had saved the day was no longer needed. While Dan Bachmeyer was casually driving home, the people he pulled from the van were being hauled into ambulances. The man whose heart he restarted was being flown to Seattle. It appears every single one of them will live. A reluctant hero says the victims were lucky their van did not flip or start on fire. And then he had to admit they were also lucky.
But I ended up showing up when I did.
No doubt about it. The man whose daughter pleaded with Bachmeyer to save him was the most seriously injured in that accident. He is 43 years old. Tonight he's in serious condition, but alive at Harborview Hospital. Now, Dan Bachmeyer passed the accident.
Feet in this van owe an awful lot to that firefighter. The van plunged off Interstate 5 near Lacey this morning. It landed in a creek. 9 of the passengers were hurt. Off-duty firefighter Dan Bachmeyer saw what happened and knew he had to act fast to save lives.
I jumped in the water, swam to the van, took a quick look inside to kind of see what the extent of the injuries were. There were still 4 or 5 people in the van at that time. I looked over, I heard somebody screaming for help, looked over and saw one other person that was face down in the water. Kind of, not, I wouldn't say being carried downstream, but downstream of the vehicle. There was also a female with him that was yelling, "Save my dad, save my dad."
And Bachmeyer managed to do just that. He got the victims out of the water and performed CPR on that man until rescue crews arrived. Now, Dan Bachmeyer passed the accident scene.
It was a serious accident. A van carrying 10 people tumbles off Interstate 5 and plunges into a creek near Nisqually. 2 of those in the van are nearly dead, but all are alive tonight thanks to one man.
That man, Dan Bachmeyer, Seattle firefighter, on his way home to Lacey, stopped and saved those lives. David Curley talked to the man many are calling a hero.
Firefighters and paramedics expect to be called out to serious accidents. For 4 years, Dan Bachmeyer has been one of those firefighters. But yesterday, off-duty and on his way home, the 34-year-old saw a puff of dust and other cars stopping on I-5.
And I knew something was up. I figured there was a vehicle off the road somewhere, even though I couldn't see it. So I stopped and got out and took a look.
This is what he saw. A van submerged in a creek, people swimming around it, some trapped inside. One man face down in the water. Bachmeyer sprang into action.
I knew I was the only one down there. And I knew that I had to decide, you know, number one, you know, who the most seriously injured patient was and how many, and what was going to be needed.
The firefighter got the unconscious man to the bank, helped 3 people out of the van, and then finally help arrived, first in the form of an oxygen kit, which he used on a man he thought would not make it.
Just got 6 or 8 lungfuls, good lungfuls of oxygen into this gentleman, and he started coming around, checked for pulse. He had a pulse. He was still trying to breathe on his own.
10 people in the van, and Bachmeyer helped nearly every one of them until crews and helicopters arrived. Credited with saving 2 lives, he's being called a hero.
If you're willing to risk all, you know, for somebody you don't know, you know, then you're a hero. I don't really feel that I was in any dire danger or anything at that time. I was just doing my job. It's a great feeling when you can help. And you really can, with the proper training and proper experience, you can make the difference. And I'm seeing it today, and I'll see it for the rest of my life.
And tonight, 2 people have Dan Bachmeyer to thank for their lives. David Curley, Cairo News.
All of the injured are expected to live. 7 remain hospitalized tonight. 3 have already been treated and released. The families are from the Portland area.
We're just glad to have him alive.
For 6 terrible minutes yesterday morning, her husband Sione appeared to be dead. He and other members of his church choir group were forced off the highway, barreling headfirst over this embankment in their van. Only this off-duty Seattle medic saw the van careen over the edge.
A little bit later, a little bit earlier, and I would have not even seen it happen. As soon as the vehicle left the road, it was off the embankment and over the edge and out of sight of everybody. That's why nobody stopped to help.
The most critical was Sione. He wasn't breathing and he had no pulse.
I wasn't quite sure what to think. You know, according to my training, I'm not supposed to take a whole lot of time, you know, with him being that he was pulseless and all.
But Dan kept doing CPR, and that is why Sione is still alive and recovering here in Harborview's intensive care unit.
I know God did it. I know God arranged that man to be there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Benjamin's dad with us today. He wouldn't be here. Are you Dan? Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Oh, you bet.
Thank you.
You bet.
You're a godsend. You don't know how many things are involved. You just don't know. Lots of prayers, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
We are so grateful to you.
How you doing, partner? You bet.
This is his dad.
Oh, really?
He saved his dad's life.
I don't think I did anything that anybody with the same training or background wouldn't have done or couldn't have done. It just happened to be me. I'm grateful that I could, you know, that I could help out.
You're an angel of mercy.
Thank you.
In Seattle, I'm Claudia Caudle, TV 11, 10 o'clock news.
Wow. 2 of Sione's children were also in the van when it went off I-5. They're recovering from minor injuries. They're doing just fine tonight. 5 other passengers in the van remain in the hospital, and they also give all the credit to Dan Bachmeier for saving their lives.
Full of people.
Dan Bachmeier was driving home after his shift in late July when he saw dust rising near I-5. It turned out a van had run off the road and was submerged in a creek. Today, the fire department recognized Bachmeier's efforts to save the people inside. Efforts, he says, were second nature.
I don't feel that I did anything that any of my fellow firefighters wouldn't have or couldn't have done. It was just kind of an act of fate. I happened to be there at the right place at the right time.
Bachmeier credits his training for his quick reaction.
Well, this might make...
Tonight on Evening Magazine.
Letterman, I'm gunning for you.
Jay Leno gears up for his head-to-head battle with Dave Letterman as they duke it out for late-night television's top ratings.
It's the kind of thing, if you win, well, that's nice. And if you don't win, you go, well...
Duty firefighter races against time and nature when a van full of people plunges into a Thurston County creek.
The way it ended up's a miracle.
A true Northwest hero risks his life for complete strangers. Plus, our Northwest Discovery, Fire Station number 6 in central Seattle.
On this gorgeous Monday, welcome to Evening Magazine from Fire Station number 6 here in Capitol Hill. Brian has the night off. Well, I'm sure by now that you know that tonight, David Letterman begins airing his late-night television show on CBS. Well, he's planning to give Jay Leno a run for his money, so we sent our own John Stofflet down to Hollywood to spend a day on the Tonight Show set to see how Leno feels about the Letterman Challenge. Well, Jay told John there are going to be a few minor changes to the show this fall. They're going to change the Tonight Show music, they're going to add a cast of regular characters to the cast, and they're also going to make a few alterations to the Tonight Show music, but no drastic changes in the style of the show. Now, tomorrow night, John's going to continue his behind-the-scenes look at the Tonight Show. We're going to meet the man who has been pulling that curtain aside for Johnny Carson and Jay all these years. What a fascinating job that has to be. Plus, we'll also find out the trick to using those cue cards every night for the monologue. That and a lot more coming up tomorrow night. Be sure to watch. Well, still to come in tonight's Evening Magazine, we'll tell you about a radio station just for kids. But up next, an off-duty firefighter single-handedly rescues a family after their van plunges into a rising creek. Have you ever wondered how prepared you would be if you came across an accident victim? Or have you ever wondered how prepared the other guy might be if you were the victim? Well, recently a family from Vancouver, Washington got the answer to that question when their van plunged 70 feet off of a highway into a rising creek. 10 people owe their lives to one off-duty firefighter who works right here at Station 6. Lowell Deo has more.
My idea of a hero who's someone who's willing to, risk it all for somebody without regard for their own personal safety. I wasn't really in any danger that I could tell.
You might just buy Dan Bachmeier's modesty. That is, until you hear what he did under this interstate early one Sunday morning. Something 10 people and several rescuers won't soon forget. It's 8 o'clock and the Seattle firefighter is heading home when he sees a dust cloud blowing over the I-5 median near Lacey.
Something looked awry. I wasn't quite sure what it was. I didn't know if something had fallen off a vehicle, if somebody had struck an animal, exactly what happened. It just looked very odd to me. Yeah. And I felt that it was worth, looking into.
What he sees would make the average man freeze on the spot. What he does will earn him a hero's title. Dan Bachmeier saves the lives of 10 people after their northbound van plunges into the median and off a 70-foot slope into McAllister Creek. Sion Patoa is one of those victims accidentally run off the road. His story is most incredible.
I hear all the story, but I never know what happened.
Dan sees some victims who may be trapped inside the van, but nearby he sees a lifeless Sion floating face down.
When I got him turned over, I checked for a pulse. He had no pulse at that time. He obviously wasn't breathing. At that point, I figured that unfortunately he had passed on. His daughter was there with me, pleading with me to save her dad. So I gave him a couple of mouth-to-mouth breaths, more up for her behalf than for his. I wanted to do the most that I could for this man. I figured it wouldn't hurt, so I went ahead and did that and then moved on to the next patient.
Dan leaves to help others out of the van, but a daughter's frantic screams bring him back to the man he had given up for dead.
At that point, with some help from a state trooper, dragged him up onto the bank, performed a couple more mouth-to-mouth resuscitation breaths on him.
What do you got, Dan? I got 2, maybe 3 ALS and 6 or 7 BLS. Getting 2 medic units, an oxygen kit, and an aid kit.
I bagged him probably 6 or 8 times, and I noticed that he was beginning to get a gag reflex back.
Sion was alive.
It's a wonder nobody was killed in this accident. Just look at how steep this drop-off is. Still, it could have been worse. The victims who were trapped in the van were trapped in 5 feet of water. Now look at the opposite bank, the dark area. That represents the high water mark of 14 feet, and the tide was moving in.
Had it happened a half hour later or so, it probably would have been fully covered with water when it got there. We would have had at least a couple of drownings.
The way it ended up is a miracle.
No question at all, he saved the guy's life. By the time that first aid unit got here, we might not have even been able to find him. He might have slipped under the water and stuff by then, so he did a good job.
I'm in this business to help people on or off duty, and it was more of an instinctive thing to stop and see if I could lend a hand.
Normally, that would be the end of our story, a hero accepting the praise of his peers. But for Dan, it's not over, because for Sion, life is not over. Today, Dan will get the most special pat on the back of all, the one from the man whose life he saved.
How are you?
Man.
Yeah. Good to see you.
I hear about you, and
good to see you doing good.
My kids told me what happened, but I did not know anything. I don't know anything what happened. I just wake up in the hospital. I don't believe it. Somebody just risks his life to give it to somebody else. At work I do CPR, and I never use it, and now on I know why we do that every 2 years. Because somebody like me drive down the road to somebody need help. It's like that he did to me.
I heard you were coming around and things were getting better, and I heard you were going home, and that was really a good feeling for me.
They're not old friends, though they vowed to become close ones. Close enough for Dan to offer Sion a bit of advice as he prepares to head back home over the river.
You guys be careful. You get down there around the Nisqually River.
Yeah.
Dan Bachmeier told us that between the time he first administered those breaths to Sion Fatoa, tended the victims in the van, and went back, about 5 minutes had elapsed. We are told that brain damage usually occurs in the first 3 minutes. So Mr. Fatoa is not only a very lucky man to be alive, but he has apparently not suffered any brain damage. Now, while we were here today at station number 6 in the Central District, Dan was given one of the highest awards that a firefighter can receive, while officials and colleagues watched on.
Dan's family proudly looked on from the front row as he received commendation from the fire chief, city officials, and his union.
Seattle Firefighters Union Local 27 recognizes firefighter Daniel Bachmeier for his act of bravery and commitment during this car water rescue, and it's awarded this 30th day of August. Dan, thank you very much.
Not surprisingly, Dan was humble and gracious.
Again, I don't feel that I did anything that any of my fellow firefighters wouldn't have or couldn't have done. It was just kind of an act of fate. I happened to be there at the right place at the right time.
The family that Dan saved couldn't be at the ceremony at the last moment due to an illness, but they did send a warm letter of thanks and some flowers. This is a man they will never forget.
Well, all of us at Evening Magazine would also like to congratulate Dan on his award, a true Northwest hero. Now stay with us, because when we come back, we'll tell you about a radio station in town where kids decide what goes on the air, Hot-Bellied Pig. Now, house calls range in price from $25 to $35, and outdoor shoots are charged either by the day or by the hour. Now, if you'd like more information about this service, simply call the Evening Magazine hotline at 448-3505. Well, kids and preteens are big radio listeners, but until recently, there hasn't been something designed just for them. But thanks to something called KidStar, that's all changing. KidStar is both a radio station and a magazine designed just for preteens, and it's the only one of its kind in the country. It's the subject of our second Northwest Discovery. Politicians are Slade Gordon, who's a senator, in case you didn't know that, has his own little feature on the show. He answers kids' questions and responds to their comments. If you'd like more information about KidStar, call that Evening Magazine hotline number. Once again, it's 448-3505. And don't go away. We'll be back with more from Fire Station 6 in just a minute. Well, as we told you earlier, tonight we're coming to you from Seattle Fire Station number 6 in the Central District, located at 23rd and Yesler. Now, this location has been a fire station since 1894, and this is how it looked back then. That's when the horses used to pull the pumpers. In 1931, the barns were torn down and they built this beautiful Art Deco station. There was a remodel in 1986 and they preserved that beautiful style. And if you'd like to come down here and take a tour of the station or any other of the 33 stations in Seattle, you need to call about a week ahead of time to make reservations. We'll put all the info on the Evening Magazine hotline. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's show.
Tuesday on Evening Magazine.
Finally, you got out over the weekend and enjoyed yourself. My family and I, went to the beach and we had a great time. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Brian's supposed to be back. Bye-bye.
Wreckage of a submerged van after going off I-5 last month near Nisqually. An off-duty firefighter happens by, slides 70 feet down the freeway embankment, and pulls the victims to safety. Firefighter Dan Bachmeier was recognized for his bravery at a ceremony this afternoon, but this humble hero does not think he did anything out of the ordinary.
Again, I don't feel that I did anything that any of my fellow firefighters wouldn't have or couldn't have done. It was just kind of an act of fate. I happened to be there at the right place at the right time.
Dan's fellow firefighters disagree. They say it was more than just fate. They say it was Dan's quick thinking and his courage.
No thought, no courage involved.
Onto a street below. Incredibly, our hero came to the trucker's rescue there,
King 5's Linda Brill begins our coverage with that story. Linda.
Dean and Dennis, this is such a bizarre story to tell you about. Just moments after a semi-truck plunged off of I-5 and landed here next to me, an off-duty Seattle firefighter just happened to be driving by, and he stopped and helped save the life of the truck driver. What is so unbelievable is the same thing happened to this Seattle firefighter in this exact location 10 years ago. Today, a semi-truck crashes through the I-5 railing at Nisqually. It smashes onto the road below, crushing the cab and trapping the injured driver.
It was a deja vu type feeling. Everybody was looking at each other going, boy, this is a little bit strange.
Off-duty Seattle firefighter medic Don Bachmeyer happened to be driving by, and he rushed to the driver's rescue.
He was hanging upside down. The vehicle looked like he was trapped. He was kind of in a precarious situation where it looked like his airway may be compromised a bit. He looked kind of pale and wasn't making any effort to try to get out at all. I kind of looked through people that were standing around, and there was one guy that looked like he'd fit right in there, a nice strapping young man, and asked him if he wouldn't mind jumping in there.
That strapping young man with the victim's blood on his elbow is William McMurray.
I was nervous and shaking, and you know, when they asked me if I could jump inside of the cab, you know, well, the first thing was help the man.
There's an odd twist to this story. 10 years ago, at the same spot on I-5, a van carrying 10 people plunged and crashed on the other side of the creek. And back then, Dan Bachmeyer just happened to be driving by. Back then, he saved the day.
No question at all, he saved the guy's life. By the time that first aid unit got here, we might not have even been able to find him. He might have slipped under the water and stuff by then, so he did a good job.
Today, Dan Bachmeyer watches some of the old video of 10 years ago when he was hailed as a hero. He is more than surprised now. He's a hero again.
I've come across many accidents, and I'm sure I'll come across more, and I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now you find me down here again.
The truck driver that Dan Bachmeyer saved today remains in serious condition in an Olympia hospital. We'll see what happens along this stretch of I-5 10 years from now. I'm Linda Brill, reporting live near Olympia.
Amazing, Linda. Thank you. Traffic on northbound I-5 is moving again.
In Snohomish County near Smoky Point, a wrong-way accident on I-5 with 4 cars slamming into each other. And in the South Sound, a semi-truck crashed through a guardrail and plunged onto the road below. First, to South Sound Bureau Chief Richard Thompson live near Olympia, who tells us the truck driver is alive tonight thanks to a Good Samaritan.
Well, that's right. When an off-duty paramedic saw the semi-truck go off of I-5 behind us here, crash onto the road below us, he took immediate action, amazingly, just like he did 10 years ago in this exact same spot.
Saw that the driver was kind of upside down, hanging in a precarious situation.
When off-duty paramedic Dan Bachmeyer reached this mangled semi, the driver was bloodied and in bad shape.
He was very pale, and he was appeared to be kind of in and out of consciousness and a little shocky.
Bachmeyer recruited another Good Samaritan, Will McMurray, to help pull the driver out of the truck.
It was very scary. I was afraid the gasoline was going to catch fire, and it was, oh, I've never seen anything like this.
But Bachmeyer has seen even worse, and in this exact spot.
10 people in a van that needed some help.
The paramedic was on his way home 10 years ago when a church van with 10 people inside flew off the I-5 overpass at the same location. After that incident, Bachmeyer told us how he had to rescue all 10 people by himself.
The only people I saw around were victims of the accident, and there wasn't anybody coming.
Today, he says he was happy there were others there to help save the truck driver, and 10 years later, he's also glad he was in the right place at the right time again.
But to be at this particular spot at this particular time again, it kind of blows me away.
And after taking the plunge off of that overpass, the truck driver tonight is in serious condition, but we are told that his injuries are not life-threatening, thanks to the help he received here today. Reporting live near Olympia, I'm South Sound Bureau Chief Richard Thompson, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
In the North Sound at Smoky Point in Snohomish County, a deadly accident involving 4 cars.
repeats his heroics from a decade. Dan Bachmeyer was driving by when he saw a semi-truck had plunged off an I-5 overpass near Olympia. He leapt into action and saved the driver. Now, 10 years ago, Bachmeyer saved a van full of churchgoers. Their van had gone over in the same spot. Listen to his story from now and then.
The driver was kind of upside down, hanging in a precarious situation.
The only people I saw around were victims of the accident, and there wasn't anybody coming, and I really had my hands full.
The 59-year-old driver who Bachmeyer rescued today is in serious condition. In Snohomish County, a deadly chain reaction for the second time.
There was a deja vu type feeling. Everybody was looking at each other going, boy, this is a little bit strange.
Dan Bachmeyer rescued an injured driver trapped after his semi plunged off I-5. Even more amazing, 10 years ago, a van carrying 10 people crashed at the same spot. And back then, Bachmeyer just happened to be driving by and saved the day, too.
I've come across many accidents, and I'm sure I'll come across more, and I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now you find me down here again.
Tonight, the driver of that semi is in serious condition. State Patrol believes he may have fallen asleep at the wheel. Do you believe in ghosts? This next horrible crash for the second time.
There was a deja vu type feeling. Everybody was looking at each other going, boy, this is a little bit strange.
Dan Bachmeyer rescued an injured driver who was trapped after his semi plunged off I-5. Amazingly, 10 years ago at that same spot, a van carrying 10 people also crashed, and back then, Bachmeyer just happened to be driving by and again saved the day.
I've come across many accidents, and I'm sure I'll come across more, and I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now you find me down here again.
This morning, the driver of that semi is listed in serious condition. State Patrol officers believe he may have fallen asleep at the wheel. He was once the highest paid state employee, but now ex-Husky football coach Rick Neuheisel is out of a job and possibly soon to be out of his Medina home. King 5's Pat McReynolds tells us about the Neuheisel house now up for sale.
There is an undeniable fascination with stories of people being rescued from perilous situations. And a happy outcome usually indicates the right person was in the right place at the right time. We're going to meet some of those right people today, including a young law school graduate whose quick response saved as many as 30 lives when the Amtrak train plunged into an Alabama bayou last week.
First, however, let's meet a Seattle firefighter who brought the right instincts and exactly the right skills to the scene of an accident recently. This man is, of course, trained to save lives on the job, but in this case, he was off duty on his way home when he scrambled to the rescue of 10 people after this accident. Please welcome Dan Bachmeyer.
How are you, Dan? Good to have you here.
Nice to have you here today. And in just a few minutes, we're going to give you a chance to chat again face to face, although I think it's only been one time since you saw one of the folks you rescued. Right. And we'll bring you together with both him and his daughter today. But let's go back and set that scene again. This was Sunday morning, 25th of July. You had finished your work shift. You're driving south on I-5 toward your home in Thurston County.
Right.
What did you see?
Well, as I approached the Nisqually area, I came around a bend in the freeway and noticed kind of the remnants of a dust cloud in the median. I didn't realize what it was, if it was a vehicle off the road, if somebody hit an animal, or somebody lost something off a vehicle, but I figured it was worth investigating. I pulled my car to the shoulder right away and ran back and looked over to the embankment, and that's when I saw that the van had left the road and was in the water. And I noticed there were several people in and around the van, people trying to get out of the van.
And that van had left the road in a very dramatic fashion, hadn't it? Tell us about how the path it followed.
Well, what had happened was the van had gotten into the median, traveled some distance down the median. There was two bridges, one northbound and one southbound. The van went right between the two, and left the side of everybody else on the road. That was the precarious thing about this. Normally there's a lot of help when something happens on the freeway. This, in a matter of into him, and he seemed to start coming around at that point.
Carla, you were driving the van. What happened? How did this whole accident come about? How did you lose control?
Well, when we coming down on the way here, and I always going on the left side, the left lane, and the other van was going in the middle lane, and then that's the only thing I saw. She stepped on the brake, and then she started moving to my lane. And then
so she almost cut you off.
She cut me off.
And these were people you knew in the other van.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go through this thing where you were feeling guilty as you're seeing your father there in the water?
Exactly, I was. I was getting, till now, I still feel guilty.
What do you think?
Because I was kind of thinking that I almost killed my dad, and also the other people was involved.
Not an easy thing to live with.
It's not really easy.
What were the extent of your injuries, Carlo? I know. Obviously, you had to be bruised.
Yeah.
And stiff and sore. But any broken bones?
Yeah. I had one broken bones in my knee, and I have cuts in my forehead and also my head, and also my right side is still hurt. But I'm been seeing the doctor.
Just lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Dan, it must be very gratifying, however, to see these
boy.
people up and around and making it.
That make the job all worthwhile?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
We have a question from John in our audience. John?
My question is for the fireman. Did you get scared when you were doing it, or did it hit you after?
That's a good question. It did hit me a little bit afterwards. There wasn't a whole lot to be scared about other than the condition of the people in the car. I was in no real danger myself.
By going down the cliff, that wasn't putting yourself in risk down to 70 feet?
Well, again, I'm fairly well trained. You know, I scuba dive. I spend a lot of time in the water.
You were still a little bit at risk.
A little bit.
Okay.
We'll take a phone call. Go ahead, you're on the air. Hello? Are you there, caller? Well, maybe not. They gave up.
Sione, I want to know what you have to say to this man. I saw he went to shake your hand and you said, forget the shake, I want a hug. What have you wanted to say to him?
Well, what he did to save my life. I never forget it. Today I never be in here or walk again if he's not in the right time.
We're glad you're both okay.
That's right.
Thanks for sharing the story with us today. Dan, thank you for being here.
Up next, the story of the worst accident in Amtrak history. 47 people died in an Alabama bayou last week, and we'll hear about that tragic night from the perspective of a young man who is credited with saving more than 30 of his fellow passengers. We'll be right back.
Because the water was rising, we could have died in within a minute. We didn't know when the entire car was gonna fill with water, but fortunately we did find an open window. Part of the bridge was protruding through the window, and that's basically what saved us, and that what was holding up the car. And so we knocked out the rest of the window and got through.
Yes, you may.
I went back to Sion.
How long was it, do you think, Dan, before any other assistance began to arrive on the scene?
I would think probably 3 to 4, maybe 5 minutes, is my estimation.
And then what was interesting was, because you used to work in Lacey, some of the EMTs who began to arrive were friends of yours.
Everybody was friends of mine. I know everybody on a first-name basis. Bob Peterson, for example, who wrote the MCI plan for Thurston County, was there, happened to be working, and he was overseeing the
overall, obviously with you being right on the scene, but overall it sounded like a pretty quick response to the accident.
It was.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick phone call. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, this is Jeff.
McDaniel from Lacey, Dan.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey. Hey, I just wanted to tell you again, it makes all of us look really good, and I'm really proud of you. I saw you on TV today, and we're just all real proud of you down here.
Thanks, buddy.
You're nice to call, Jeff. Thanks very much for doing so.
Thank you.
And all of us are very grateful for the work that all of you guys do. Right after this break, you're going to see an emotional reunion as we meet two of the accident victims who were rescued by Dan on that Sunday morning. Also still ahead, the incredible story of one of the heroes of last week's Amtrak train crash. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Dan Bachmeyer is telling us of a situation in which he rescued 10 people. He was almost like a knight on a white horse because he came, he rescued the people, and then he disappeared. You were gone. They didn't get to see you again.
Yeah, everybody was in good hands. My function was over.
What was it like for you to do this as an off-duty rescue? It's one thing to go onto these things when you're at work, but how did you feel about yourself, and how did you feel about the situation when you went home after doing this?
Well, you know, I'm in this business to help people, and it was an opportunity to get in there and really be involved. And every once in a while, you can really, as it turns out, you really make a difference. And I think that's kind of what happened in this case.
Did you feel real good about yourself?
It took a little while to really have everything settle in, but yeah, I did.
Would you say you feel like a hero? Honest?
No.
But talk about being in the right place at the right time.
The right place at the right time with the right training and the right background.
Absolutely.
But had it not been for Dan Bachmeyer, one of the people you are about to meet would not be here today. His daughter, who was driving the van, realizes full well just how close a call it was for all of them. Please welcome Sione Fatawa and his daughter, Kalo.
Good to see you.
Moving a little slow, but moving. How are you, Colin?
Hi. I see the tears in your eyes.
It's been a couple of months now since this happened, almost a couple of months. Actually, Dan tells us he came to see you in the hospital while you were there, but you were still kind of struggling through your recovery and don't probably remember too much of that.
Right.
How do you feel now?
Well, to be honest, I've never been sick in my life. I always a hard worker, and when this happened, it's kind of upset me. But I was so happy I was alive, and I can walk again.
Kalo, how do you feel about this man sitting next to me?
I don't know what to say to him. He's really wonderful, and I also wanted to say thank you to him for saving my dad's life.
You know what was dramatic, and you probably have to take a couple of steps back from these situations to realize just how close it was. But Dan, with his trained eye on the situation, wasn't at all convinced, at least for a moment there, that your dad could make it through this ordeal, because I mean, that van had plummeted 70 feet through air.
That's right.
And slammed into that muddy surface down there, and of course you probably exited the van through the windshield.
Yeah.
Did you have, now I know that one of your injuries was some of the vertebrae in your neck were broken.
Right.
What were the other injuries, Sione, that you had?
Well, I have got everywhere on my body when I was wake up in the hospital for a lot of time, from my toes up on my head, from going through the windshield. And I don't remember anything, even the whole thing.
You don't remember the accident at all?
Not even when Dan gave me a CPR, I don't even remember until I wake up in the hospital.
What was it, Dan, that finally revived him? Because you had actually left him at one point, and then when were you able to get back to Sione and bring him around?
The State Patrol was real close in the area, and they helped out immensely also. With the help of a state trooper, we managed to get him up onto a flat spot on the bank. About the time that the fire department started showing up, they lowered me down an oxygen kit, and we got some oxygen. into him, and he seemed to start coming around at that point.
Carla, you were driving the van. What happened? How did this whole accident come about? How'd you lose control?
Well, when we coming down on the way here, and I always going on the left side, the left lane, and the other van was going in the middle lane, and then that's the only thing I saw. She stepped on the brake, and then she started moving to my lane. And
so she almost cut you off.
She cut me off.
And these were people you knew in the other van.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go through this thing where you were feeling guilty as you're seeing your father there in the water?
Exactly, I was. I was getting, till now, I still feel guilty.
What do you think?
Because I was kind of thinking that I almost killed my dad, and also the other people was involved.
Not an easy thing to live with.
It's not really easy.
What were the extent of your injuries, Carlo? I know. Obviously, you had to be bruised.
Yeah.
And stiff and sore. But any broken bones?
Yeah. I have one broken bones in my knee, and I have cuts in my forehead and also my head, and also my right side is still hurt. But I'm been seeing the doctor.
Just lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Dan, it must be very gratifying, however, to see these
boy.
people up and around and making it.
That make the job all worthwhile?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
We have a question from John in our audience. John?
My question is for the firemen. Did you get scared when you were doing it, or did it hit you after?
That's a good question. It did hit me a little bit afterwards. There wasn't a whole lot to be scared about other than the condition of the people in the car. I was in no real danger myself.
By going down the cliff, that wasn't putting yourself in risk down to 70 feet?
Again, I'm fairly well trained. You know, I scuba dive. I spend a lot of time in the water.
You were still a little bit at risk?
A little bit.
Okay.
We'll take a phone call. Go ahead, you're on the air. Hello? Are you there, caller? Well, maybe not. They gave up.
Sione, I want to know what you have to say to this man. I saw he went to shake your hand and you said, forget the shake, I want a hug. What have you wanted to say to him?
Well, what he did to save my life. I never forget it. Today I never be in here or walk again if he's not in the right time.
We're glad you're both okay.
That's right.
Thanks for sharing the story with us today. Dan, thank you for being here.
Up next.